My name is Anton Mikhailov. I started here about 2 years ago working in physics simulation. From then on, I started working on motion control with Rick. I actually built some of the first prototypes. So before we actually had production set up and any hardware people involved, we went to Home Depot and got some PVC pipe and off-the-shelf electronics, and we built this thing from scratch. So we have a couple of early prototypes that we built that were pretty fun to work with. Actually, it worked very well, but obviously not as well as the prototype hardware, but you can see that it's evolved quite a bit since then. So we put together these prototypes and we ran them by developers and other groups in Sony, and they were very excited about it. Especially they were excited about the glowing light idea and the kind of interactions that would allow, as well as taking advantages of other parts of the camera like face tracking, body recognition, motion tracking, and so forth, as well as augmented reality and other experiences we've also seen on the iToy, PlayStation Eye. So enhancing those experiences as well as delivering new experiences that are key to the motion controller. This particular prototype is probably about a year old, but earlier demos you can see online. You can see Rick has done stuff way back in, I think, 2002 with iToy, which was very similar in spirit, where you track a object that's a known shape and a known color to do these kind of interactions. But with the new advances of technology and some clever engineering here, we can get much more precise. By simplifying the problem that we have to do, we can make it more precise as well. So the main portions of this is, of course, the glowing ball is tracked by the camera. It can change color, so the camera knows what color it is and it's able to look for that color in the image. Of course, that gives you position tracking, so by tracking where it is in the image as well as how big it is, you can extract the X, Y, and Z position sort of away from the camera and perpendicular to the camera. The internal sensors inside, inertial sensors that you may have heard of before, accelerometers, gyroscopes, stuff like that, can be used to determine the angle of the device, which you can't get from the ball alone. But by combining those, they really kind of work together. Both have difficult cases when used alone, but when you combine them together, they actually meld and play together very nicely. So those two things combined through some filtering algorithms can give us a full position and orientation of the device, which is really useful for game developers. We've brainstormed very many applications for this device. I think casual games are definitely within the scope of this device, and it's very exciting to enable those kind of games on the PlayStation. It's obviously very intuitive, so it's great for casual games since people can pick it up, they understand what to do. If you swing, it swings. But at the same time, the precision it offers allows it to be used in more complicated games as well. There's, for example, some experiences that are just not really possible in the DualShock. If you can imagine trying to place an object in 3D space, that requires you to be able to move and rotate the object at the same time. And if you try to ever map that onto analogs, you might think you can use the left analog to kind of move it and the right analog to turn it, and it's a mess. So, but if you wanted to do that for a game, like if you wanted to assemble a puzzle, or if you wanted to do a sword battle or whatever, if you wanted to have precise control of a sword or a gun, all those experiences are more kind of core gaming experiences, and they're made much better with this controller. The camera adds a whole lot of other capabilities we're able to do. So all the games that were possible on iToy and on PlayStation Eye are now possible, and some of the things that were not possible for PlayStation Eye before, due to a lack of absolute tracking capability in some senses, you can now enhance as well. So things like face tracking, motion detection, voice recognition from certain games as well. So you can take all that and it kind of all feeds into each other to create one whole experience. I mean, the first thing people always think is, let's make it into a sword and shield, let's make it into a tennis racket. And of course those are they're really fun. There's nothing wrong with those applications. We try to come up with things that are kind of off the wall and haven't been seen before. One application that I'm particularly excited is controlling characters directly that are maybe not human characters. So we have a demo that lets you control a snake by moving the controller, and that's something that people haven't really done before, because again, with the DualShock you might consider mapping it to attacking or defending or whatever, but here you actually get true control over the thing. And you can think of controlling an airplane directly, or a robot's arm directly. So all those things are much more satisfying, so you can use the controller to move a large giant arm and pick things up and throw them at things. The system is completely open to use one or two controllers. I think there's a ton of experiences that you can do with just one. Some experiences you can do with one or two. For example, if you want to control something's arm, you can use one controller to control one arm, or you can use two to control two. Depends on the game. Something like a sword game, you can imagine just controlling the sword and the shield being automatic, or if you have two controllers, you can now control the sword and the shield. The demos we showed at E3, a lot of them used two controllers, just because we thought that those applications were sometimes more exciting, but you can easily generalize it to either playing alone with two controllers, or two people, one controller each, or so on and so forth. So for something like the bow and arrow, it just feels much better to use two and pull the string out with one and then draw it back and hold the bow with the other. So some things are just way more fun with two, but they could certainly be done with one. There's no restriction to that. Yeah, actually, I was part of the project that I was entitled with is communicating to developers and talking to them and showing them new hardware. I mean, obviously, since the technology is very different from what people are used to, it took a lot of time to show them how to use it, show them the advantages and disadvantages. Actually, at the start of the project, I traveled to the UK to work with London Studio, and I was in charge of taking this beast on board an airplane, and that was quite an experience. So trying to get this through security, let me tell you, makes you sweat bullets. So we worked with developers, almost from day one. We got their opinions about how the technology should behave, we really tried to get a feel for what kind of tracking information they would like to get. That's where we really obtained that, we need to have this position and orientation kind of tracking, because a lot of times developers working with things like accelerometers, it's actually not very intuitive to understand what the data coming out of that system is. Is it a gesture? Is it a motion? It's difficult to parse, so it makes certain things ambiguous and difficult to make. So developers have been really excited about this technology because it gives a straightforward answer about where the device is, and that's something they can easily understand from a developer standpoint and say, okay, I can use that to plug that right into my game, whether it's a shooting game or a driving game or an action game. You can, at the core, all games are about something positioned in space interacting with other things in space. So when you have the device connected to your position, that lets you express yourself in that natural interface. And it's natural for both players and for developers. So they're very excited about working with this technology.